Hey there, everyone. Um, Welcome to episode 6 of season 1 of the In the Green Room podcast. For those of you watching on YouTube or Facebook Watch, I can only apologize for what is my lockdown haircut. I tweeted out yesterday that my hair has gone from the 80s era through the 80s era and back in time further to what now is starting to look like 70s hair. So I apologise. Hopefully a haircut will not be too far away. Anyway, so this episode is a great one. It's with my longtime friend Nolan Mcgowan, who is an actress originally from Belfast, residing here in London. We talk about that a lot in this interview and kind of the trials and tribulations of being someone whose network has been built up in essentially overseas to one degree or another, and how being based in London whilst that network is available can be impacted, and what effect that can have on your career. We also talk about, which is something that I've wanted to talk to Nuala about for years, and never have actually got around to asking her. We talk about the impact of her having a twin who is an actress, and kind of essentially being in the same competitive market, very competitive market as her twin sister. Obviously, I appreciate that most of you watching or listening to this aren't twins yourselves, but we do talk about how that then applies to the comparison trap, shall we say, of being an actor industry-wide, and kind of the lessons that you can learn from that. We talk about that and a whole lot of other things across this episode. So I won't waffle on anymore. Without further ado, here is my interview with my good friend, Nolan Mcgowan.
So I am going to stick with my standard question, despite having changed it last week or last episode. Is being a professional actor and having a career in the industry, if you were to go back to graduate Nuala, would you say that being an actor is everything you expected it to be, or not?
I believe especially at graduation, I was maybe slightly more naive than I am now, but I was still a realist. So yes and no.
Okay.
So yes, because I didn't expect myself to be someone who was constantly working, I'll do a couple of little jobs and then boom, I'm in the national or, doing all these big ones that I, still aspire to do.
Yeah.
And again, like comparison, like I remember when being in graduating and just comparing yourself, like you look around the year, I'm sure most people do this, you look around the year and you go, who here is gonna make it, who here is gonna stop after 5 years, who's gonna not be doing this next year, and like you're not sitting going because they're crap and they're crap or anything like that. You're just thinking, I wonder who here is gonna make it. Because and again, it's not a rule that it should only be one person from the year. It could be no one. It could be so many people. But
Yeah.
if you think about, statistically, there's probably maybe one in your years. There was, I think, 40 in my year at the start, and then by the time we graduated, maybe there was like 34.
Yeah.
Through various reasons. But even then, that was just my year of acting. That wasn't how many people are in each of those years, etc., etc., etc. So I remember being quite realistic about it, going, you're probably not going to be making a living out of this anytime soon. So make sure I had to get a day job anyway. I was working throughout Mount View, working in a pub every single weekend, 2 nights a week. So, it's hardly work shy, but I think maybe the thing that I was more naive about was like agents and what they can do for you and what it means to get, an agent full stop, and then a reputable, good agent, new
Mhm.
boutique, big, small, etc., all that. I was definitely naive about that because I had signed with. I remember coming out expecting, like after doing my showcase, I think I did like a really good scene. It was very much something that played to one of my strengths, and I was looking around the rest of the group. There was a lot of comedic actors in my year, and like I'm a comedic actor myself, but for my showcase I saw that so many people were doing comedy. I was like, I'm not
Yeah.
going to stand out as another comedy actor here, which I know I have, but I'm not going to stand out when over 2/3 of these are funny. So then I just chose a scene from a play by Owen McCafferty, Scenes from the Big Picture, where
Yeah.
this woman who really, really wants a baby, she's basically got this doll and she's sitting there, and then her husband comes in and thinks she's stolen this baby because a baby in the town has been stolen, and he thinks she's
Right.
mad enough to steal someone else's baby, and he just spews this like bile at her, just awful, like you're awful, and like I am cheating, and why wouldn't I, because of you're being mad, and la la la, just this awful monologue at her. And then she drops the doll, but of course everyone thinks it's a baby at this stage, so then everyone's like and then she gets to react and be like, you did it, and she gets this really great last line of like, if you were to stay, I'd only have to cut your fucking eyes out, and I wouldn't be pretending either. And that's the end of the scene. I was like, that's the part I want to do. I want to be like, that's gonna, people be like, oh god, yeah, that was pretty bad. Like, geez Louise, because and that's like like in the middle of two comedy scenes. So I remember expecting. Sorry, my foot's gone dead. Expecting more attention. Is that the right phrase? I don't really like saying it, but it's true. I expected slightly more attention from agents than I got. But then, having said that, this was, how many years ago was that now? Nearly 10 years. Oh my gosh, it was nearly 10 years ago. So being 10 years older, I look back and I'm like, well, you did the groundwork and how to learn to act, etc., etc. But when it came to researching agents and all that, I hadn't a clue. If someone came up to me and said, here, I'm from United Agents, I'd be like, great, who are you?
Yeah.
And I'd look it up after because
Yeah.
I hadn't a clue.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, then it was like trying to do a crash course and who do you want to represent you? But regardless of that, who's coming to see you and who's going to come up and talk to you at the end? And that eggy thing afterwards, like everyone will stay and have a drink and they'll make a beeline for you. And I didn't see many people stay at all, which makes sense because you'd like to think, as an actor now, that your agent isn't going to waste an entire morning and afternoon trying to maybe recruit more actors when there's jobs coming in, especially when it
Absolutely.
usually that was in April time, so that's when so much work's coming in for the like late casting of spring tours and early casting of the summer stuff and some pantos.
Yeah.
So I remember, I was a bit surprised at what I didn't get as much attention as I thought. Not that I was sitting going, because I'm absolutely amazing, but I thought it was a very good scene for me to do and I delivered it well. But there's so many people.
Why do you think? Because I think it's an important point. I think the expectation, even before graduating, like, why do you think then that you didn't get the attention that you had anticipated? Do you think it was a case of that was just the agents generally, or do you think it was something to do with your choice of scene, or maybe choice of role?
I wouldn't say it's choice of scene or choice of role. Excuse me. I think it's the amount of people who were performing that day. Like, no matter what, if they've gone looking for, like, knowing they have this hole to fill in their books and they see that person, they will pay, I believe they would pay attention to that person more because they're like, well, we can represent you. Whereas I was, I'm a Caucasian white woman who was in her early 20s who could pass maybe for late teens at the time, who was Irish, and my otherness was that I was Irish. And there's so many people who look very much like me and are already working. Like, you only need to see any production at the National with an Irish cast and everyone looks like me. and
Yeah.
they've got much bigger CVs, and they're the same age.
Yeah.
So I feel like there wasn't, maybe they weren't looking for that, but equally the amount of people on that stage that at any given moment, and not only that, like I did do my scene, but we also had a lot of actor musicians in the year, and because I'm an actor musician, and we opened the entire show with like a band style of Too Darn Hot. So I had a bit of a saxophone solo. Absolutely, like I was pooing myself. I was so nervous. Opening the show going, oh my God, I've only ever played this in front of people like in the school orchestra 10 years ago.
Right.
You know, so like I was like, oh, maybe they'll pick me up on that. But I don't know if that made as big an impact as we thought it did, because it was still a group of 10 people playing instruments for one shortened version of Too Darn Hot.
Yeah.
Like, that was it. So I feel like they did the best they could with the amount of students they had, but maybe it would have been good to have either less people in the year as a whole, or to have two separate showcases. And then on top of that, it would have been good if I myself had reached out to agents, maybe gone to the powers that be in Mount View at the time and said, can I have a list of the agents you've invited, to then look if there's anyone I want to invite, or reach out to them directly, because we were all told like, oh, don't be doing this, because I think they were worried. They were like, if you were gonna write to agents, write as a group of a year. And I feel like in hindsight, that's bad advice. I know why they gave it. I think they gave it because they didn't want like these agents to be inundated with 40 emails from each student.
Well, also there's an element of I think because I think it's generally advice that drama schools give, and I think there's also an element of drama schools not wanting certain students to be put out because an agent has come to see a particular individual. Yeah,
which I get, but equally, I don't know if this is a bad way to think about it, but if you're that particular individual that maybe wouldn't have had that exposure to that agent, then I don't see that as a bad thing.
Yeah,
and if they do,
agreed.
like if I'm in a show and I'm inviting casting directors to it, I know that they will come and see a show, and there's like we've maybe already developed a rapport, or they've never met me, or we've only emailed, and I'm like, this, finally I'm in a show that's near where you work, I'll get you some tickets, you want to come and see. And then great, they've seen me in something, but they've also seen the rest of the cast that maybe they didn't know, and it's in the program. So again, that's more difficult in a showcase because everyone's unknown, and in my case, there were so many people on the stage. But I still think it would have been worth writing to, because it's not like they got every single agent coming. Like, wouldn't it have been good if I wrote to an agent going, especially at the time, because I did martial arts until I was 18. So at this stage I was turning 21. Maybe I was just 21. Anyway, it was only 3 years since I had done my black belt, so I could still have it on my CV. I've recently got rid of it because I haven't done a thing since. But I had it on my CV. I was like, yep, I'm a twin, and I am Irish, and I can play the saxophone, I can play the guitar, I can play the ukulele, I play the Irish drum, and also I'm a black belt in martial arts. Like, how castable. It's like, great, you've got so many strings to your bow. And I didn't think at the time to write to smaller agents. I didn't even think, because I thought, oh, I have to do the work myself to find out what these agents are, when the fact was I was in a drama school in London. I could have gone to one of the departments and gone, do you have a list that I can work from? Because a lot of the time it was by the actor's yearbook, and I was like, I'm a student that works in a pub for £6 an hour. I cannot afford a £30 book.
And also,
like, even
surely
if it's like
it makes more sense for you to be
invest.
Well, exactly, and surely it makes more sense for you to be contacting the agents that the drama school or the university already has a working relationship with, rather than just going in blind. And this is the thing I get frustrated about with drama schools generally, is I think the advice to actors about the business side of things that they give is generally so bad.
Or really vague.
Or vague, bad or vague, or really naive. Actually, sometimes I find a lot of it's stories that you hear all the time about actors that have have trained, and then they've gone, you know, I'm in my final year preparing to go out into the industry, and I have no idea how it works, and it's really problematic.
And I feel like they're to use a strange analogy, I feel like they're always catching up. Like when I was younger, like if I was getting presents of clothes from my family, they would get the style that I liked 4 years ago, because they finally realized that that's something I liked. But by then I don't want it anymore. And I'm like, thank you, I don't want it anymore. And it's similar, like they were pushing the actor muso kind of, because they did an actor muso production of Company as one of our third year shows. I was not in that. And then they decided to put actor musicians in the showcase, but then they didn't really, I feel like they kind of pushed it, but at that stage it was starting to be more in vogue. But then not only that, there's other stuff that was in vogue, like not even in vogue, important. It was after we had left that, like, very much the teaching has changed completely. In my view, I cannot speak for what it is like now, and I really enjoyed my training, and I really enjoyed it what I got there. But no one is perfect, and no institution is perfect.
Indeed, yeah.
But I felt like I didn't know the business side of things, like, full stop. But again, I didn't seek out that information, so I can't completely blame them on that. I feel like that's probably why a lot of institutions are like, maybe wait until you're a bit older, because if I had gone back and trained now, I would absolutely, like, hell for leather, go for the training, as well as all the other stuff that lies outside learning how to act and learning how to develop, your character.
I don't know if that would help though, because I actually the reason I went into training was less, I mean, it was also me being a bit naive in my own abilities as well at the time, as a precocious 18-year-old. But I was going more because I had no idea how to get into the industry, and it was my way in. It was like, I'll go and they'll tell me how to actually get acting work. That was priority number one, because I thought I've got enough ability to kind of cruise through if I need to. Obviously, I'm going to be taught how anyway. But more of interest to me was less about actually how can I act, and more how can I act professionally. So that was, I was chomping at the bit to get to the industry preparation module of my training, only to be told, well, you get some headshots.
You had a module.
Yeah, you get, but even then it was, you get some headshots, make sure they're good. You upload your CV to Spotlight, make sure it's good. Then we'll do a showcase, and you'll email agents, make sure you pick some good ones. And if you can, get a show reel together. But really, the way that you get agents interested in you is you invite them to your show, which was not true. Show reel was crucial. And that was pretty much it. I remember we had a lesson about how to pose for a headshot.
How to pose for a headshot?
Yes, I shit you not.
Don't.
One shoulder forward and all that sort of stuff. I mean, again, I can't speak for how the teaching is now, because actually the tutor that was responsible for that class now is not responsible for the class, and neither works there anymore either. So I can't speak for how it is now.
Right.
But certainly at the time, it was like, okay, that's great, telling me to, that it's useful to get a website and this, that, and the other. But how about you actually teach me about the mechanics of the industry rather than get a good headshot? Which, to be perfectly honest, I get frustrated when I see a lot of people who are touting, their advice to actors about how to get far in the industry, and their opening gambit is get a good headshot. It frustrates me, because it's that goes without saying, really, I think.
Yeah, but also it's saying good isn't helpful, because you're not clarifying what good means. And good,
well, also it's subjective as well
for each person. Yeah, like my recent headshots, I think, are the best ones I've got, and I was actually really comfortable with the photographer, and it was the first time. I didn't even think that this shouldn't have been the first time. It was the first time where you take a couple of shots, he'd turn it around and show you what it looked like, and then you could go, can we maybe, I know how I'm coming across right now is that, maybe can we try this? And whereas any other headshot session I had done, I didn't see them properly until the finished product was there, and I had to pick, my favorite 5 or whatever. And when you're paying, okay, for some people, chump change, but for the likes of me that has never earned a lot of money, full stop. I've always been on the lowest end of, whatever household I'm in. I am the lowest earner, no matter what.
Yeah.
That it's like, well, I've just spent like nearly £300 on this, and I really want to make sure I'm getting bang for my buck. And it's only been in the race where it was very much like, well, try this, and he's an actor himself, and I feel like because he had that experience of doing them himself, and then obviously now he's a photographer, I was like, oh right, yeah, and wasn't scared of getting shots that were interesting is not the right word, where for me it at least it felt like you were getting movement within a picture. So if I look around, I'm like, that's me, like that's and it's not like I'm pulling a facial expression, but it's how I look, it's what I do, it's how I come across, I feel like, and all this stuff. And like, in other headshot sessions, I would like bring loads of t-shirts. I was like, oh no, I look good in these t-shirts. And the one that I ended up using in my headshot, I hate that shirt. Like I feel like it looks awful on me. But in a headshot, it was so effective. I was like, oh yeah, what says comedy? Like polka dots? Well, what does say comedy like polka dots? But it works, So I do feel like headshots do help, and I, not this year, working this year, that's out the window. But working last year, it's the most work I had, and some of the most exciting work I had was last year. And I don't know if that was because I've been in the industry for 9 years and slowly getting a little bit more known by just sheerly like my agent putting me up for stuff and maybe doing self tapes. Like even if I don't then get an audition, at least they've seen my face, yada yada yada. Or if it was more than that, like you can't annoyingly you can't trace it back. Like I'm wondering, because I did the feature film last year, and then it turned when I went into the audition, because you did a self tape and then you went in and did a face-to-face audition from that self tape. I don't know how many people were seeing face-to-face, but I remember going in, and then one of the producers is like knows/is friends with Dinah, who did the directing, writing of Ronna and Donna that Neve and I did. I don't know if I got in that room because he knew me, or if he or if he literally didn't know, and I went in, he was like, oh yeah, like Dinah, and like we didn't. And then the director was like, oh, how do you know each other, what's this connection? And I was like, oh, he knows the director of this short film I did with my twin sister, which then obviously makes me sound super interesting. It's like, oh, you've got a twin, and oh, you've worked, great, someone's actually hired you, great. But then also having, and it was maybe the first time I'd actually done a face-to-face audition with the casting company, Calling Crawford. But then since then, they've asked me to do self-tapes for stuff that I wasn't even put up for. And it's because they now that we've made that connection. So I feel like, I know it was definitely pushed of make connections, yada, 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 but it's not really explained how. And I don't know if that's something you can explain, to be completely honest, because each person's different. Sometimes it's schmoozing at a press night, but I don't think I've ever gotten anything from schmoozing at a press night, not even my own.
It's strange, isn't it? Because the help you get in that area is often, it's important to network. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Surround yourself with
that
good
who you
people.
know definitely is important, but how you get to know those people is difficult.
Absolutely, and that's the problem. Is like so many things in this industry. The advice comes from having read it in a book somewhere, or having had a conversation, and some producer once said to this guy that you're now talking to, you got to get to know people, you got to network, you got to mingle, and people are just going yeah, and then talking to every actor they know and going, yeah, you got to network, you got to mingle, but actually there's a significant lack of substance in terms of actually knowing how to do it, and that's not their fault, but it's because there's so much. I can't remember who this quote was from, but I remember hearing a quote, which is obviously this applies far more to the American market in the way that they say it, but the point remains true, which is if you major in acting, you should minor in business.
Mm-hmm.
And the real lack, and I think particularly it's even worse in the UK than in the US, I think, is that there is a considerable lack of understanding of business mechanics and business essentials
Mm-hmm.
in the acting market. And I think there's so many factors in that, and so many contributing factors that I don't really want to go into. But the point is I think there's so much lacking, and even the people that are teaching in the drama schools don't understand the mechanics of how the industry works. So how can they teach?
And because it's an ever-changing beast, like
Absolutely,
a lot of the people come in, you know, a lot of people who were directing us were either directors in their own right and working, or actor come directors who were working as actors in their own right, and therefore they could give you some advice, etc., etc., etc. But also, I feel like just at the end of the day, it's something that they can prepare. Okay, yeah, maybe I could have had more preparation on the business side of things, but you have to learn by doing. And not only that, like they were arming me with information to write to companies just as general, and you know, and what's the word, general and more like personal, not personal, generally, and then closer, like, oh, why don't you work, if you're going to work in London, then yada yada yada.
Oh, right.
Whereas
Yeah, I see.
when I'm then back in Belfast and I'm trying to get work, it's very different, you know. Like, well, I don't know if you had this, but when you're getting information about going to auditions, like, turn up 10 minutes early, no more, no less. Like, don't be flustered. Like, make sure you give yourself enough time. Maybe if you don't never been there before, go there the day before to make sure you know how to get there. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, all for that preparation stuff.
Oh yeah,
know that they're probably going to run late. Know your lines, like all this stuff. And for me, at least, I find in Belfast it's different again, because I have turned up and maybe been the first person there, like not even the creative team. The creative team are there, and they're not penalizing you if you don't really know your lines. Now, if someone comes in, they literally haven't even looked at the script, then yes, they're going to be like, look at the script, what are they doing? But it's more, can we work with you as a normal human being? Like, are you going to be a pain in the bum to work with, or are you going to be?
But I think that stuff doesn't get explained to you.
It's not, and I feel like that's when you can come up short in a meeting, because when, like, the whole thing of when you go in and sit down, now I'm speaking purely as an actor, not as musical theatre. I've done maybe one audition that was musical theatre-esque, and there was little to no chatting. It was like, get in, dance, play, sing, get out. And I was like, I hate this, I'm not doing musical theatre. Whereas with the chatting, like, you sit down, it's like, so what have you been up to? And I remember going into my first audition where it's like, what have you been up to? And I'm like, I'm training. Have you not read my CV? Like, I didn't say that, but in my head it's like, oh, well, have you not read my CV? But they're just trying to get you to talk. And you don't need to be like, oh, I've just done X, Y, Z, I'm really horrible. But you just need to be personal and, you know, be comfortable to have a conversation with another human being, because you want to see if they're someone that you would like to work with as well.
Absolutely.
I know that's easier said than done, because it's rare that I've gone for a job, been offered it, and then gone, you know what, no. Like, I'm like, you know what, yes, thank you very much, I need the job. So but again, it's for you to know whether or not you're going to get on. And then, just as I've said to you, the 3Ks, like, not to be mixed up with KKK, geez Louise, no. But cash, kudos and kicks, like cash, kudos and kicks. And if you go into an audition, you know that it is something like, maybe it's at a theatre you've never worked in before, well reputed, it's with a company that's well reputed, or a director that's well reputed, you know that you're getting good money, then you can go in there knowing that you've already ticked 2 of those boxes. But then if you get on with them as well, then it's like, well, great, I've got the kicks as well, I've got the cash, got the kudos, got the kicks. If I get this, then it's an absolute yes. Whereas if you go in, it's a really strange vibe. Then maybe you just don't really gel. I mean, you don't have to gel with every person you work with, but if you really don't gel and you're like, this is low to no pay, that's another thing we can get into. But maybe it's at a good theatre. You like, do you really want that job? Low to no pay, and you didn't actually get on with a creative team. But it's at maybe it's at a London theatre. Like, that's going to be a long, however many weeks the stint
Yeah.
is, you know. So I feel like, I don't know how I got here. I'm doing a lot of rambling, but I feel like that's something that it took a while to do auditions to realize what that chatting meant, and why you have it, and not what to say. Not that I go in scripted, but when I hadn't worked for ages, like I had not worked for maybe 2 years, like not a dicky bird, like nothing. I then would go in, they're like, so what have you been up to? And at the time, Neve and I were just to have something to do, because neither of us were working. We're like trying to write a script or trying to write sketches. Now, they don't need to know whether or not I've submitted this to anyone who can actually do something with it. They just need to know that I'm writing it. So I was like, I'm actually writing this thing with my twin sister. I'm like, oh, you've got a twin? Anything I can do to like, get in the twin thing, like I will, because it's a talking point. It's also helpful for Neve to know that we're both twins. And I'm pretty sure, I hope, and I'm going to check that she does the same. Then just to have...
You mean you've never checked?
Then it's a conversation. I don't think I have. I just kind of take it as read that she does. But now I'm like, do you? I really hope you do. Yeah, so I feel like that's something that you get used to. But then it was so different when I've auditioned in Belfast, because like my agent doesn't really have the connections of theatre in Belfast.
Yeah.
But that's fine, because I have more connections than she does, because I have mostly worked there, yes, with the same people, but there's so small a pool of people to work with. Like the actors is a big pool, but you will know someone who knows someone who directs or produces, and oh, can we get you in for this? Or, you know, it's slightly more, very much who you know than what you know, but it's easier to know who you know, because there's less people to choose from. Whereas when you're over here,
circuit.
My goodness, yeah. Like last year was the first time I'd done a paid play in England, not even in London, in England. I was like, right, like, and I was like, yes. And then I got my second one, which then of course had to not happen because of this.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Great. Well, that's the first time I've worked in the spring.
But that shit doesn't get talked about either, right? And I have done one paid theatre production. We graduated the same year, so we're in our 9th year now, or just coming up to the end of what would have been
coming up to the end, nearly 10 years.
Second year, what would have been the 10 years since the end of our second year. I think we're coming up to, aren't we?
Yeah.
And so 9 years. I've done one paid theatre production to the point that I would consider it a wage that I could live off. And even then it was just about it was a cutting it fine, but that doesn't really get talked about how difficult that is to break into, and also how long it can take.
I feel like that's not, I mean, it's kind of hinted at of how long it can take to get a paid job, but like for me, it still was like, I was lucky that my first paid job, and again, this is something that came with being able to work back home in Belfast as well as working in London, to the point where everyone was like, do you even live in London? I was like, yes, I do live in London. I just go back to Belfast. Tends to be like once a year I was getting, you know, be it 1 month, 2 months work, which was great. Like it was great that I would be like, until the 2 years where I didn't work, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is I usually get a job once a year. But I had, it was so, that job, so I got my first job when I was I'd not graduated yet. I was just about, like, I'd finished training, but I hadn't graduated yet. So it was in the summer. I did this thing in Belfast. There's this company that I really love called Bruiser Theatre Company, who I had seen the first time they had done a show. They came to my school and did Midsummer Night's Dream, and I thought it was hilarious. It was so funny. It was the first time I'd seen Shakespeare and understood what was going on and enjoyed it. I was like, this is great. This is so silly. And then went to see every single one of their productions they would do 2 a year, and I would go see every single one, be it with the school or with my mum and dad. And if the school was going, I would then go with my mum and dad as well, because I just loved it. And I was like, I remember seeing their poster outside Bruiser Theatre Company and trying to Google it. And bear in mind, this was in 2001, 2002. So websites were not as big a thing. They did not have a website that was more than just, this is our show and these are the dates, like just an electronic poster, basically.
Yeah.
And I was like, how do I get to work with them? Like, how do I email them and see, how? And I didn't even think, I have to be a trained actor. They're not going to hire someone who is 11. But I was like, no, yeah, of course they will, of course. You don't think these things. But because I really liked them, then they started doing these summer schools. They do a lot of education and outreach, and they did these training, some bruiser boot camp thing. So Neve and I had done it. We had just finished school, and then for the 2 weeks in the summer, like, our family never went on holiday because we would all try and do like drama theatre stuff, and some money went on that, and they were like, okay, go, bye. So we were just going into Belfast and then doing this bruiser training, and it meant you were working with the artistic director, and you were working with like her team that she tends to work with. They got to know us. They got to know myself and Neve. Neve had worked with them then. So if this was 2008 that we did this training, then later in 2008, I was in Mount View. Neve didn't get in and was really wanting to get into Central, so she was going to wait a year and defer. And during that year, she then got cast in Bruiser's professional show. So she hadn't trained professionally, and she got that. So immediately, like, you're on their radar again, because she knew both Neve and I. And when I was graduating, they were doing Cooking with Elvis, and they needed someone who could pass in inverted commas for 14. I could not pass for 14 at 21 years of age, but if it was young looking, I could pass
from
for
a
18
distance.
and on the stage. And on stage, it's a comedy as well, so it's not, I mean, I didn't
exactly.
look like, if they did it now, like, there's not a chance I could play in that role, which really surpassed. But they were looking for someone to do this. It wasn't even a research and development. It kind of was, but it was just to do it for a weekend, paid, and go back to Belfast, do this weekend, and then do a bit of a showcase in very small studio theatre in Belfast, just to see what the reaction would be. So did that. Then they wanted later, they're like, we're going to mount a full production, we're going to audition people. And I couldn't get over the audition because I was still in Mount View training. I was like, I can't, I'm still doing this training, and I can't, like, get the day off. But like, I'm very much would love to be considered for the role. They're like, yeah, it's fine. So then they auditioned people, and then I got a call, a month later, saying they were offering me the role, and I was like, fantastic. So that was my first thing. But they had worked with me. That it's if you're doing R&D, it's not a given at all. But it was really good. They basically cast everybody who was in the original R&D, but they were like, you know what, we should cast the net far and wide to see who we can get in. And I think they just didn't find people that they wanted.
But I think that says a lot, doesn't it, about kind of going back to what we were saying about really developing strong relationships with people in the industry. Because I mean, I didn't know that you'd done a production without auditioning, and it hadn't been upfront offered to you. It's different when they're not auditioning, when they've gone, well, we want them anyway, so let's ask them, give them first dibs, and then if they don't want it, we'll audition people. But I mean, it's really it really goes to show how important that can be.
So I feel like anytime, the one thing that I will do that maybe won't be paid very well, if at all, but leading to a paid production, I'll probably do an R&D, because you get seen. And even if you don't work with them, no harm, no foul. They still know you from, more than just a 20-minute audition and a 5-minute chat. So I like, that was great. And then because of that, they do, 2 shows a year. So I worked with them 2 more times. 1 more time, 2 more times, a couple more times. And because of that, then other companies in Belfast had seen me. So then years later, that director worked with a different company and directed the pantomime. And I was like, I don't know when you're casting the pantomime, They had already cast it, but they were looking for an assistant director, and they were like, would you be interested? I was like, yes. So then I got to do assistant directing 2 years, because the director knows me and knew my work ethic, and also knew that out of the 2 of us, I'm the bad cop and she's a good cop, because she doesn't like being mean. Whereas I'm like, it's not good enough. Like, you have to do it again. I know you're tired, but we have to do it again. And won't take the crap. Obviously, I'm not awful. I'm not like, oh, and I see you're bleeding from your feet. Tough. I'm not that bad, but just a bit more. She knew that the dynamic would have worked, and we get on and can work well together. So that was, that was great to know that I could do that. And then because of that, that company then was casting farce about 3 funeral directors, and it was a new writing, etc., etc. And they had cast someone else in this role that I ended up getting. They cast someone else in this role. Now that person, I've never met her, but I've seen her on stage, and she's seen me on stage, and we have a mutual, like, her best friend is a good friend of mine, and she had double booked herself. Was like, I can't do this, like, and she has a wee girl. She's like, I can't be double booking myself because then I don't get to see my child. And she then said to the director, why don't you get Nuala McGowan in? She's really good at accents, because this role was multi-role, but one of them was a Polish undertaker. It's like, Nuala's good at accents, get her in. So then they did get me in. I don't know if they got anybody else in. I feel like there was supposed to be one other person who didn't turn up. But they got me in, and then they were like, okay, and then offered me the role after that. And then that has come back since again. But I wouldn't have been even seen for that, like, in the mix. That they can be forgetful. If I'm not in Belfast and constantly, like, emailing them, they'll not think to cast me. Whereas anytime I've asked for an audition, I'll get one.
That was
But
going
you
to be
have
my
to do it off
question.
your own back.
Yeah, that was
But
going to be
then
my
if
question.
she
How
didn't
much of this
recommend
came
me,
about because you were keeping in touch?
yeah, and I hadn't kept in touch with that theatre company enough, clearly.
Yeah.
But also they had already cast her. Like, this woman, like, gets straight out offers. She is known very well back home on the stage, so she does just get straight out offers, and she's fantastic. Like, she's so good. But because she had then not only said I can't do it, but then off her own bat, like, she doesn't owe me anything, recommended that they hire me, and that got me a job. That got me 2 jobs, you know.
I've been
And
in the same
it
position.
really helps. It really helps to speak up your friends as well, because a lot of the time it does feel like everyone's your competition, but that is not true. And if there's something that you cannot do or don't want to do, but see someone else who maybe would enjoy it, then say it. Like, the job I was supposed to be doing in March of this year, which obviously I couldn't do, Neve did it last year, and they needed an actor musician who could devise, and Neve's would be more of a deviser than me, purely because she trained in it, but it's not like I can't devise. And they had done this show, and then they were going to do it again, and Neve knew that she couldn't do it, but then and she was going to suggest, do you want to get Nuala in? And then when she was, like, just about to email them saying, do you want to get Nuala in, they were like, can we get Nuala in? And the only reason why they know me is because I went out there, saw her show, helped them do the get out, and then they were having, like, after show drink at someone's house, because I knew I was going up there to help Neve bring her stuff back. And then it meant that they knew that I could play the ukulele and was an instrumentalist. So that got me that. They just straight out offered that to me because they needed it to be cast fairly soon. And I was like, yeah, great. Like, sometimes it really does help just to think of others, because if you think of others, then they'll think of you. The flip side, I've recommended something to someone who got the job and they didn't say thank you. They didn't say they got the job, and I will never recommend them again.
You never recommend them
because they didn't.
No, that's it.
No, absolutely not. And they're great. But I was like, but what's the point? Like, I just thought, oh, there's someone who needs to, who played the cello, like, to an amazing degree, like, so good cellist, for an actor muso show. And I was like, great, sent it. Thought, didn't even hear that they got an audition, didn't even hear they got the job until they got the job. I went to the press night and then saw them at the press night, like, oh, thank you, by the way. It's like, it's a bit late. Because I'm here, you're saying thank you, for goodness sake. Like, what?
Yeah.
So it does, and I'm not saying I'm going to sit and hold a grudge and be like, what an absolute boob, but I don't really think that's on when someone recommends you something off their own bat that you wouldn't have heard, because it was something in Belfast and you wouldn't have heard about it.
Absolutely. And to me, that is where, because people talk about professionalism in this industry as turning up on time, knowing your lines and stuff. But to me, that is ultimate professionalism there. It's knowing to recommend someone. It's knowing who to recommend. It's knowing to recommend the right person. And it's knowing that when you have been recommended, to reach out. This industry can be so isolating anyway, that any degree of, I mean, even if somebody reaches out and says to me, I'm working on this project, there's no budget, it's literally something that I'm doing, would you consider doing it? I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much for thinking of me. Sometimes, I'll have people going, thank you for doing me such a big favor. I'm like, but you thought of me, so thank you.
Exactly.
Which means that you appreciate
you need to be
what
flattered,
I do.
But yeah, it is flattering, but you're not doing it because you're flattered. It's like, oh good, okay, someone does actually know that I can do my job, especially if Absolutely. Like, if you've been, and sometimes you do need to take, trying to get my thoughts in order. Sometimes you do need to take stock is not the word. You do need to remember that you can do it. There's a reason why you've done it this long. There's a reason why you've done what you've done in the past. Like that 2-year stint where I barely even had an audition. It was just awful. I felt so down. And at the time as well, Neve, I keep saying Neve and people don't know who Neve is. Neve's my twin sister. And at that time, Neve had gotten her second job at the National Theatre. And I've never been seen for the National Theatre. And I don't know if I ever will, because my twin sister will get seen unless they're casting for twins. She is my exact casting. The only thing she can't do is play the saxophone. That everything else is the same.
Yeah.
So I was like, obviously super happy for her. Like, I'd rather her get it than anybody else. I'm like, no, Neve needs to get it. So she got the job, was well chuffed, and she always, like, if I couldn't afford a ticket, she would get me a ticket. I saw her in the shows. Even if she was doing an understudy run, I'd see her in understudy run. If she was on the stage, then I would see her on the stage a couple of times. And every time she would bring me into the green room, introduce me to everybody. Like, they knew both of us every single time. The same with me. The fact is, though, that I did most of my stuff in Belfast. So if she was flying over, I'd be like, great, we're going out. I'll make sure to introduce you to X, Y, and Z. And it's not like, here's us, I'm selling this. Like, and that's how at least I thought networking was. It's sell, where it's not. It's
the opposite.
that this is my sister. You've probably heard me talk about her. Yeah, she's an actor. She's doing this. And then they talk about whatever.
I always see networking more less as selling and more going, hey, let's be friends.
Yeah, it's like building friendships instead of, and yes, professional friendships, but still friendships nonetheless. Like, no one's going to want to work with someone who constantly seems like they're selling.
No.
It's like you're talking to an Avon rep. Like come on, please. Stop selling to me. So that, I remember during during that 2-year stint of not working, Neve getting this great job, obviously so happy for her, but also so sad for me.
So let's talk about this twin dynamic, because I think it's a unique thing that you can talk about that I don't think many people can, but I think it also is a wonderful avenue to discuss comparison being the thief of joy and all of that sort of stuff, right? Because most of the time when people go, well, you shouldn't really compare yourself to another actor because you're so different, you're different castings, you know, you have different abilities, etc., etc. And yes, you and Neve do have different abilities, you're not the same person, but much as you say, like, you likely will not get seen for the National anytime soon, because why would they call you in when they can call Neve in, who they already have a good working relationship with? And the fact that
her first job there was quite, again, very similar to my first job ever, because she was represented by an agent who represents kids, but was branching out to represent some adults, and started representing Neve, had a really good rapport with people at the National. And then the National were casting for Leah La, which is a play set in Italy, maybe. It's not set in Ireland, but they wanted an Irish cast. So they were hiring for people to play these roles of, they had a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 15-year-old. And Neve had just graduated, so again, we both looked young for our age. And they were like, well, you could probably go for that role of Kutsa, who's 15. So when Neve went, but because she was a bit older, not only could she go for Kutsa, she also understudied the lead female part. So she got in there firstly because they were casting for kids, but they did widen the breakdown where you could be above licensing age. And then she got it from like, obviously that got her in the door, and then she got it, and now she's got this relationship with the National. So luck does play such a huge role. I just wanted to put that out there, because just thinking about that, I was like, if you didn't have that agent who has a working relationship for when the National are casting kids, and they're looking for older kids, and she just happened to reach out and get you, like, you might not have had this relationship that you have with the National. So it's one of those things where I very much doubt that I'm not going to be defeatist, but I doubt that I will be seen by the National anytime soon, unless suddenly I get, a good film out and I'm more of a name.
But how do you two kind of reconcile with that that the reality that Because I'm always of the view of, the universe is abundant. There's opportunity out there for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
How do you two? And I've never asked you this personally. How do you two reconcile with the fact that you are up for the same stuff? That you are, I don't want to use this word, but you are essentially competing against each other, and yet you are twins.
You just accept it, like.
Yeah, I suppose.
You accept
you have
it,
to,
and
right?
there was. I mean, you can't not and as well. If anyone's going to get a role that I'm not going to get, I'd rather Neve get it. Like, you just have to make that clear. But also, there's times where, and when Neve gets a role and I'm not getting a role, she's in the money more than I am, and she'll treat me like. Anytime I was going, if she was in the national, she would pay for my tickets. I would go out and we'd be in the green room, which is not expensive, but she'd be like, right, no, I'll buy this bottle of wine. Like, do you want to meet me here and we'll go and get some dinner? Like, I can still enjoy that as much as, maybe not as much as she's enjoying it, but she will then, do stuff like that. Whereas when I got my film last year, I was like, oh, well, if I get, like, I'd never gone for a feature film full stop. And I was like, oh, this role seems very similar to me, but you get so many like that, so many actors, at least in interviews, like, that role is made for me, and you hear it from the person who gets the role. What about the 10 other people that role was made for that didn't get it? So you can't hang your hopes on this role's made for me, and if I don't get it, then I'm a failure. It's just you didn't get it. There's someone else that was chosen. But anyway, I thought this role's made for me. Did a good audition, yada yada yada, got the job. And I remember thinking, if I get this job, not only that, I just secured another job that at the time I thought was going to be amazing. It wasn't, but hey ho. So got this other job, and I was like, great. And I was like, great. And then I was waiting to hear from this other one that would slot together, so I wouldn't be double jobbing, but I would almost do a back-to-back job, which I have never done. If anything, I get one a year, and that is it. And it's like 6 weeks out of the year, so it's not even like 3 months, it's 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I was like, great, I really, really hope I get this. And I remember sitting, praying, going, I'm not much for a prayer now. Pick and choose when I decide to believe. But I was like, if I get this role, I will. And I said to Neve, I was like, I will take us both to Bruges on holiday. She was having a bit of a crap year anyway. And I was like, we can have some twin time, just us hang out, and I'll take us both away for a wee holiday. And again, it was not an expensive holiday at all by any stretch of the imagination, but she didn't have to pay towards it. I was like, if you put money in, maybe just buy some dinner or like go halvesies with one of the trains. And then I did the job and got the job, which was great. So I was like, great, I'm going to book this. And not only that, they had to do like a couple of pickup days, which meant I got like an extra day and a half pay.
Nice.
And it was a really good daily rate. So that daily rate, that day and a half paid for the holiday alone. Again, not an expensive holiday. I'm coming across like I'm Miss Monday bags, and definitely not. But I was like, great. I then said, don't pay for anything. I'll pay for it. So she was having a rubbish year, but we had this really nice holiday together. So reconciling that, and it's not like, oh, you've got a job, you owe me. It's something you want to do, but also you just have to make the peace. Like, I have to make the peace that I don't think I'll be seen by the National for a while. Really hope I do, but I don't think I will. Then I'm like, well, that's not the only theatre I can work at. Like, where else would I like to work? And now that I've got a film under my belt, I'm like, maybe I should push doing some film and TV, like, more, because I've actually got a little bit more under my belt. So like during lockdown, like, I'm not sending loads, but I'm sending a couple of emails saying, you worked with this person, I worked with this person, and this film should be coming out. I just wanted to like show you who I am, and here's it. And luckily I have a link to the short film that Neve and I did. So also that's the double-edged sort of, here's who I am, but also you're going to see the other star and character, my twin sister, in this role. So they're already going to have seen Neve, even if it's me that is emailing them.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm pushing that. But then, having said that, Neve's recently gotten to do BBC Bite Size. Anyone who's listening at home who has kids who are learning about GCSE religion, Neve is one of the BBC Bite Size presenters.
That's cool.
So that was only recently released, but that's something she did. So now she's she's got a huge link to the BBC, but she's on the BBC website. So like these, again, very
It's
small
still those 3 letters on that CV, isn't it?
Yeah, and she can write to them and go, I've done BBC Bite Size, and maybe get more presenting work. It was more presenting than acting, or be seen as an actor, because you can do both. That leads me on to the idea of pigeonholing. Like, it's also good for me and Eve to pigeonhole ourselves as twins, because for
Yeah.
4 years I represented myself, because I was with the agent that I got after graduating. Not going to name names. They probably work for other people. They didn't work for me. And I was like, this, after 2 years, I was like, I'm sorry, I don't trust you to represent me. You don't know my CV. You don't know that I'm an actor musician when I told you in our meeting that I was an actor musician. This is ridiculous. So I left. I was like, I'm just going to do it myself. And at the time, my job was only working in the evenings. So I spent my days slogging. And I worked as much as I work now, maybe not for as well-known companies that I would go be seen by, but I still worked very
Yeah.
low, but still I worked, and I didn't have to pay any commission. So when I was doing that, though, Neve's agent would have represented us both as twins.
Yeah.
So then when that's the flip side, right now it's the flip side. Well, I know that my agent is going to be putting her up as well as putting me up as twins. So it's still just this extra layer of work. So yes, it can be difficult that we go up against each other, but it's also great that we're going for stuff that we wouldn't usually, no one else will go for. And not only that, it's rare that we actually do the same audition. It's more who's going to get this, or who's going to get the audition slot.
Yeah.
Generally, we don't.
Interesting.
We only audition together if we're doing Bruiser auditions, and that's because we've both worked with Bruiser. Or my friend sent me a casting breakdown, and I was like, oh great. And again, it's something she knew she couldn't do. It was an Irish role in London. She lives up north, she's not Irish. I was like, great, I'll go for that. And I sent it to Neve saying, email them because they're doing auditions this Thursday. I've literally just got an audition through. And she was like, great. And she emailed and she got an audition through straight after me. And then we obviously, neither of us got it, but it's not like that. If I was going for it, I was like, if I don't get this, I want Neve to get this. So you just have to make your pace. It also depends on, not every twin has the same relationship as me and Neve do. So a lot of them are very close.
But I think regardless of your relationship as twins in comparison to anyone else, I think actually the way that you two are forced to deal with the situation, shall we call it, that you find the situation that you find yourselves both in, I think it's a incredibly strong metaphor for actually how anybody should handle competition in the industry. It's just that you haven't had the choice to make that decision. It's been thrust upon you because life and genetics and all that sort of stuff. But actually I think sharing in each other's success is what everybody should be doing with all of their peers around them, I think. And equally knowing that there are some roles that you're not going to get because somebody else is going to have a better relationship, and how much of that is completely out of your control.
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, like thinking, people who are like, oh, I'd love to play, okay, for want of a better person, Lady M, maybe someone slightly more niche than Lady M, like a character from Dancing at Lunasa. Like, oh, I could probably play that character. And I mean, the older I get, the character changes. Like, they're all young girls. The older I get, I'm like, what? How young can I pass? Like, actually, knowing that is actually something that a lot of people don't know is what they pass for. I just had to ask my agent. I was like, look, I've got quite an age range on my spotlight. What do I pass for? And she's like, I think you can pass for 23 to 28. Let's say that. And I was like, great, let's do it. And if there's one that comes up with maybe 22, then great. But generally 23 to 28, I think, I don't think I can pass for much younger than 23. So I feel like that's something where what was I talking about? What's the lead on to this?
About oh bloody hell, I've lost the thought process as well.
My short-term memory is shot. Twins helping each other. It's gone. Oh well, we'll listen back and go, I
wanted to ask you, because it's one of my favorite questions to ask, and actually you kind of touched on it, and it's one of the few questions that I do make sure I've asked everyone, or try to make sure I've asked everyone, because I think it's another one of the parts of the industry that people don't talk about. So particularly, I mean, it probably happened more frequently in the past than it does now, from the sounds of things, from what you said, but on those rare days where you have had the opportunity to be like, right, today is an acting day, I have nothing else to do, I don't have a day job to go to, although those days are probably far more common at the moment.
They're gone.
the days where you're like, I've got no day job to worry about, I've got no errands to run. Today is all about my acting career.
Mm-hmm.
How do you spend that day? What do you do?
I mean, it really depends on what needs to be done. So before I moved house, because I moved house last 2 weeks ago, so I was packing, but I knew I knew it wasn't going to take the entire week to pack up the house. I was like, you know what I should do? I should probably do some acting stuff. So I knew that day that I was going to reach out to some people who do show reel editing, because mine was so old. And not only that, I had the full film of Rana and Donna at my disposal that I had yet to put into my show reel, because I never had. I was like, I don't have £100 to spare to get this edited in, and that was generally the price going when I had researched places to do it. And the people at the time as well that maybe would have done it for a discount were busy because they're filmmakers and they're doing their own work. So now when that is dried up and there's nothing to do, I was like, right, let's reach out. And I talked to Neve, and someone from her year has just started a company where they do show reel editing and podcast editing. But it literally is still, it's just about to launch the website. So he's like, I'm going to do a mates rate. I'll get this done for a discounted price. And I just sent him the stuff, and it was done within a day. And so that day I was like, oh my goodness, I've got my new show reel, emailed my agent, uploaded it to Spotlight. And I was like, fantastic, like that. And even if it wasn't a full 9 to 5 doing that, it's so important to have that at my disposal, because it has been so old for so long. And not only that, for me specifically, because I have had eye surgery in the past 6 years. 6 years ago I had eye surgery. This show reel was pre-eye surgery, so my squint was way worse, and there was no, and didn't then match up with my headshot. I looked much older in my headshot than I did in my show reel, which I watched when I was sending it to this guy. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so young. Note to self, don't do that if you're in the middle of a pandemic and eating everything in the fridge. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm so young and beautiful. And then I look at yourself and I'm like, look at you, you mess. So but I didn't know that. I just thought, oh yeah, it looks like me. But then I looked at it, it's like, that doesn't really look like how I look like now. I think people would be like, it's not like I've got haggard. I'd like to think not, but I don't look that young.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, maybe get rid of this scene altogether, yada, 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 like talking to the guy, like trying to get it all done. I was like, okay, get that scene out, get this scene in, but leave space for when the feature film comes out, we can then get some stuff from the feature film, because it was also set, it's a period film, so it's set in the 70s, so it's a completely different look than everything Rana and Donna and the show reel scene I did. I kept in one of the show reel scenes because it showed that I can do an accent, because I'm doing an English accent in it, because all my other ones are me speaking as I am. And I think it is important, if you can do that, to show it, because everyone has accents on their CV, and people don't believe it, because I've gone into auditions where they're like, we need you to do a Lancashire accent, and they'd sent like a script and a video of showing you how to do a Lancashire accent, like a little bit of phonetics if you read them. I was like, great. And I was like, okay, I'll make sure that what I'm sure is something I can do is definitely right. And it was, and I did it. And I went there, like, okay. And of course they do the talk first, like, how you doing? So they hear what my natural speaking voice is, and then they go, right, let's read it. And I was like, great, do you want me to do the Lancashire accent? And they were like, let's hear it on your own. But like kind of hesitant. And I was like, they don't think I can flip and do this. I was like, yep, did it on my own. And I think they were going to then just stop it there. And I was like, can we do it now in the Lancashire? Because like I have prepared it. I can't do it. They were like, yeah, let's do it. And then I did it. And then I don't know if they were just being complimented, but they were like, that was a bang on Lancashire accent. Like, well done. Thanks for doing the work. I was like, you're welcome. Great. But also it just made me think how many people have come in saying they can do something that they can't. Just as I've had to start culling my CV, because I was like, you could do this 10 years ago. You can't do it now. Cut it. You can do this now, though. Put that on. Really keep it on top of it. So that day,
I made that mistake. I made that mistake. There was a role that it was that kind of like, I am so perfect for this role. It was for, it was actually, I don't mind saying what it was. It was the musical for the Small Faces.
All or Nothing.
All or Nothing, yeah.
Who, incidentally, a guy I know was in that, not as the role you were going for. I was like, oh,
yeah,
what is what we talked
about it. Yeah, we talked about it, didn't we? Yeah. And that was that was a situation, you probably know this already, but for those
Mm-hmm.
listening at home,
Mm-hmm.
a situation where they were deliberately after somebody who was short, because the person in real life is a short bloke, dark hair, blue eyes, which is me. I think I get away, certainly casting wise, as a young version of him. And he was the drummer of the Small Faces, and I used to highlight used to play the drums, but because to practice drums you need a lot of space, since being at drama school I hadn't really played the drums apart from the odd occasion where I was asked to as part of apart from where I've been asked to do it on stage briefly. I hadn't played the drums for, it was probably coming up to 8 or 9 years by that point. But I was like, it's fine, I can play the drums
like a bike.
I've got the basics. Yeah, exactly, it's like a bike. Once you got the basics down, it's fine. And I was like, but I can't sit on my laurels. I do have to make sure I'm up to scratch. So I knew somebody who worked for a music studio. I said, look, can I just have a room for a whole day, and I'm just gonna jam
practice, yeah,
for a whole day, so that I'm ready. Did that. I was like, okay, I feel comfortable enough. I was not as good as I thought I was when I first went in, but I got to the point where I was like, yeah, I feel like I know what I'm doing. But what I hadn't researched was actually the layout of the guy's drum kit. I practiced with my layout of the drum kit. So I went into the audition and they had the drum kit ready, and I'm like, oh, okay, there's a bit missing. And I was like, can we? And they were like, we'd really rather you didn't. And that just threw me.
Yeah.
But if my skills were up to scratch where they should be, to the point that I could put them on my CV, which I hadn't done, then it wouldn't have been a problem. And I think there's lying on your CV saying that there's stuff that you can do that you can't do, but equally as important, which doesn't get talked about half as much, is actually knowing that you can still do the things that you claim that you can do.
Absolutely. And things that maybe you didn't think were not even didn't think they were skills, maybe you forgot about them or didn't think they were skills, like putting that on your CV. So I've recently gotten rid of martial arts because I was like, you're not highly skilled at martial arts anymore. Yes, you did it for 6 years and got your black belt, but you have not trained since. I did look into training again, but it's like the cheapest class that I found was £10 a class, and it's not something I can afford to do. Even if it is an investment, it's not something I can afford to do. And not only that, it's not something I've done the groundwork in getting known as that as a performer. So I then have to try and get that groundwork in. I'm like, what's my groundwork in? Doing comedy, doing music. That is what my groundwork is. Being Irish, like that's it. So push that. But then I started this band with my sisters, and then started playing the Irish drum, the bodhrán, so much more often than I did before. So now I'm not saying I'm amazing at it. Anyone out there who's a bodhrán player would be like, okay, yeah, you can play it, but you're not as good as X, Y, and Z. And I'm not saying I am. But for the purpose of going into an actor music audition where they just want you to bring whatever instrument, I will always bring that in because it sets me apart from other people. Not many people go in with the bodhrán. I even went for an Irish one. I just didn't think at the time. I was like, I'll bring in the saxophone and I'll bring in my guitar. And at the time, I was not as good as the guitar as I am now. And again, I still have it on my CV as basic guitar because I know if I go in and like, can you do X, Y, and Z? And I cannot do it. At least if I've got basic guitar on it, I'm like, no, it's because it says basic guitar. Or if I go in on the flip side and they go, can you do X, Y, and Z? I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, great. And it's a nice surprise. But I did this great audition in Ireland at the Abbey Theatre, which is Ireland's national theatre. And it was one of those fantastic auditions, just where it was a massive workshop. And it was basically the artistic director, Graham McLaren, wanted to get to know people. He was like, I just want to get cast a net far and wide so I can get to know people in Ireland who are acting today. I didn't bring my bodhrán in Ireland, in an Irish play that was actor music, and there was not a bodhrán in that room at all. And I was like, why did I not bring down my drum? I own one and I've been playing it for years and I didn't bring it. And hindsight is a bitch because I'm thinking back, like,
isn't it?
You could have done that. But now I know I will always bring that in, because when I did that, the other show that I did last year that I thought was going to be good, that was a nightmare. But I remember going into that audition and I had my drum and they were like, oh, that's good. And I think that got me. I think that swayed it in my favor. So yeah, I think it's good to know how to curate your CV and really be honest with yourself, going, what can I do? Because I remember you talking to me about the All or Nothing musical, and at that stage I'd done so many actor music auditions because it was the only stuff I was getting, and it made me change my guitar on my CV to basic guitar, and it made me go, right, I can play. Okay, you can play the alto saxophone. You've heard other people in this room, and you are as good as them. Great. But maybe change my vocal range, because I was like, you can't sing that high anymore. Change that. So I altered it, and I remember you saying this, and I was like, well, have you played the drums? And you're like, oh, I haven't in a while, but I'm sure. And I remember in my head going, you need to be playing that. You do not want to go in here with people who are in bands who are playing the drums and then be caught out, because they will throw stuff like that, because they've done stuff for me where I go in with a certain song, like, can you do something maybe more finger picky? And now I've got enough in my rep, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do this, and I know it's something that's great with my voice, or is something I can only do where it sounds interesting, where I don't need to sing over it. I'm like, and I can do it. Wow, it was a massive bumblebee at my window. That was huge. So I only know that by doing these auditions and either having great ones or having awful ones where just nothing goes right. But I know what will throw me and what won't. Like going in them going, can you sing more in your accent? Can you maybe sing that in a different accent? And then suddenly people get completely thrown. They can't remember the words, they can't sing the tune. But that didn't throw me, because as a singer, like, I'm very much a singer, so I was like, that's not going to throw me. That's fine. Can you sing in harmony? Yeah, which harmony? It's fine. It's something, because it's what I do like every day. So I just remember you saying that, and I was like, oh, this might be a learning curve for him.
It was a massive learning curve. I remember I phoned up my agent at the time, and I said to her, I haven't got that job. And it's like, in hindsight, I should never have even gone into that audition room.
But here you got seen, even if.
Yeah, and I tell you what, it's a great story. The full story is a great story, because I had no idea really how big this show, because it was showing at the Vaults Festival at the time. I had no idea what a beast that show was going to turn into. Yeah, and it's one of those things that I can say, I auditioned for that, which is a cool little story.
I felt that with every Derry Girls. Have you done Derry? Have you seen Derry Girls? I auditioned for it, didn't get it. Maybe you should audition for that. I did. I didn't get it.
I bet I bet that's quite painful.
Funny.
Particularly as an Irish person.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, I did the audition, and I got to meet the casting director, Carla Strong. She had seen me in Bruiser shows, so when she went in, she's like, Nuala, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm great. How are you, Carla? Like, and I got seen in person, whereas Niamh did a self-tape, and I don't know if she would have been asked to be meet in person if Carla had seen her in more stuff. So again, it's who you know, and I remember I had invited her to stuff, but actually in the past she had seen me already, and I didn't know. So you never know.
You don't. So we're going to have to start wrapping up, but there's a few kind of quick fire questions I just want to fire off just before we do. There's about 3 of them, I think. I do this every time. I'm like, is it 3? Is it 4? I don't know. So first one, what is it that you absolutely love about being an actor?
When you, for me at the minute, because I'm getting a lot of comedy roles, is when you have got them rolling in the aisles because you've done something absolutely hilarious. When you're more on stage than screen, because I'm fairly new to working professionally on screen. But that for comedy, at least, when you're doing a farce and they are wetting themselves, and you've got that, and then it's just like, I haven't worked for 2 years, but this is worth it.
I genuinely think that's what got me the bug. Was that the first time I experienced that, for sure. Yeah. It's how I got the bug, for sure.
So good.
Okay, so what is it on the flip side then? If there was one thing that you could be like, I'm changing this sucks, what is it that you hate about being an actor?
Probably,
or strongly dislike, if you don't like the word hate.
Oh no, I don't mind it. Probably, and it is probably something I could maybe change, but it's, for me at least, never being financially rich in any way or comfortable in any way. Like that, I'm trying to find the balance of a day job, because I don't do loads and loads of different jobs, because I hated that. I've done that. Like triple jobbing is too hard for me to then juggle that. So trying to find a job that has longevity, which I do currently have, and hopefully still do after this pandemic, that I enjoy, that utilizes brain skills, that gives longevity. So when you go into an audition, you're not like, this is the be all and end all. If I don't get this, I have to go back to that awful job. So, but even then, it's still not well paid at all. So that is annoying. Like having to save for something, and then all you're doing is, like, I was saving for ages, and then my guitar broke, and I had to spend money, instead of on holiday, on a new guitar. Having said that, I spent way more money on the guitar than I needed to, and it's amazing, and it sounds absolutely great. So it's so much better than the old one. But again, I was like, this could have been for a holiday. So that, I think, is the kicker, especially when you haven't worked in a while. You're like, I'm so sick of being poor.
Yeah, it becomes a choice of, do I invest in my career or do I treat myself?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that happens so rarely, full stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Final question then. So go back in your Wayback Machine. You got a time machine. You going back 9-ish years to just about to graduate Nuala.
Yeah.
What would you say to just about to graduate Nuala?
What would I say? I would say,
what advice would you give?
Well, when I just graduated, I'd just done my job, so I had a little bit of money, and I would have said, invest that money in your career right now. Learn to do your tax return sooner. Stop it, because the amount of stuff that I definitely paid too much tax in my first 3 years, because I didn't think to claim back the stuff that I now claim back. So I would say, get your show reel fixed, and like edit that CV. It's absolute rubbish. Like half the stuff you got on there, you basically look like you're a dancer and you're not. So it's like, get rid of that, and email people. Do your research now, and actually do it. Don't wait 4 years and do it now. So I'd say just learn more, because and really jump on that bandwagon of being a graduate, because I kind of did, but I don't. In hindsight, I could have done.
It is my
but then again, at the time, it felt like I was doing loads, and I don't know if I could have done more. But I'm just like, I
can't tell you how much of a regret I have for how I handled the first 3 years of my career, because I was so focused on setting up my theatre company and getting that off the ground. Because in my logic, I was thinking, well, if I've got a theatre company that's doing well, then it doesn't matter how well the rest of my acting career goes, because I'm in full control. I can perform whenever the fuck I want. But rather than, I didn't appreciate the value of being a fresh graduate in the acting industry,
and how sellable that is.
Yeah, and I just that I genuinely believe that if I had put more focus on marketing myself as a graduate actor than setting up that theatre company, I would be much further ahead in my acting career. Much further.
I'm the same. I wish I did more with Cooking with Elvis, because it was it. And after doing Bruiser shows since then, that one was one that sold out. It sold so well, and was like, people were rolling in the aisles. Like when we went to because I live in Lisburn, which is just outside Belfast, and usually when you do a show there, it's not very full. It was packed with most of my family, but again, everyone was rolling around in the aisles. They were having the best time, and we as actors, we were having that was one of the highlights of my career, was that, because it was just the best time. But I didn't capitalize on it. I didn't ask the people, give me these theatre companies, give me their email address, and just outright asked for their email address. Also, this is before GDPR, so you could have done that. I was like, can I have their email address? Do you mind if I mention your name? Great. And then email them. And even if it's not, oh, they can't see me in a show, it's like, I'm currently working like this, like, and I live in London and in Belfast, and just gotten more from that, because I was a fresh graduate, and I was just working with a very well-known theatre company back home, and I did not do that work. It was then when I worked with them the second time in a show that it was the Caucasian Chalk Circle, which was great, but not as many people wanted to see that, whereas Cooking with Elvis was a farce, and we had more of an audience there. So yeah, I would have wished I would have done more groundwork then, when I was new, whereas when you do it now, it sometimes feels like you're starting from square one every single time you do it. Even though you're not, because you're not seeing the cogs that are working behind the screen. But when you don't know who knows you, because you can't know that, it can be very difficult.
It certainly does. Yeah,
I was
Hindsight
to say
is a
stop working
bitch.
front of house because that was I don't know why. You know, because I remember
Everybody
the
feels
reasoning
like
for
that's an
doing it.
in.
But it's not even that. People think, I think for musical theatre it is an in because a lot of their auditions, you know, they happen within 2 months and you're doing it every single day, like, and you really do need your days free. But for me, I did not need those days free. So I worked front of house for like 6 years. Well, maybe 5-6 years doing that when I just could have done a day job. I would have said, do the job I'm doing now, work
Yeah.
with kids, sing, use that because my voice has gotten stronger from doing it. It's now not as strong because I haven't done it in 3 months, but my voice has gotten stronger, my range has gotten stronger, my belt has gotten stronger, my comfort with working with people who can't understand you because there's babies and there's people who don't have English as a language full stop, never mind a first language. I feel like I would have done that because then I would have done it for work 3 days a week and make the same amount of money as working 8 shows a week and not having a social life because I just sacrificed a social life full stop for like 5 years and I wish I didn't.
Yeah, I did the same, working in hospitality.
Yeah,
Bye evenings and weekends.
Yeah, and it seems like it's worth it, but for me, it just wasn't. I feel like if you're musical theatre where you are doing more auditions because all the recasts in the West End, like you can set your clock by when that's going to start and when that's going to finish. But for actors, like I wasn't getting enough auditions to warrant needing all my days free.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Harsh reality, but a reality all the same. Thank you, Nola.
Thank you.
We always have good chats anyway, so it was inevitable that you were going to be on here.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a shout out as well. I just realized I wanted to do a quick shout out. Sorry for the Jake who did my show reel because he's just getting it off the ground and it was a bang up job done in 24 hours. And I think his company is called Casts and Reels. So CASTSANDREELS. So it's like show reels, podcasts, everything, editing up my great guy. And they're just starting out. So support them.
I might look into it myself because my show reel's getting a bit long in the tooth.
He's great and he'll send you an edit and then go, what do you think? And then you can say, like this, don't like that, maybe try this, and did it so quickly, especially right now because there's nothing else to do, but they're just trying to get off the ground. So I'm like, great, use them. And I'll use them again when I want to put the feature film in.
So that's casts and reels.
Yeah.
Awesome. Was there any social medias for yourself that you want to share?
Do you currently
want to remain strictly anonymous?
No, professionally, the only thing I've got is IMDb because I've recently joined IMDb Pro because my social media is purely for me, like as a non-actor. So I like to plug that. Plug the film when it comes out. I don't know when it's coming out. It's currently called The Power, or if you're me, you say The Power because that's how I pronounce that word. It's supposed to come out at the end of this year, starring Rose Williams and some great actors, including Nolan McGowan, this guy. So, like to plug that as well. So,
awesome. Yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that. Thanks so much again, Nola.
Thank you.
It was obviously right to get you on. As I say, because I know that we have all these great chats anyway.
All the time.
All the time. We don't see each other for like 3 or 4 months and then we have these conversations that it's difficult not when 2 actors get into a room not to talk about all the trials and tribulations.
And for it not to only be about that, because it's not like we meet up and we only talk about this, because there's definitely people I've met and that's the only thing they can talk about. I'm like, please, there's more to life than this career.
Yes. Absolutely.
Like, yes, it's something you need to do it, not want to do it. But you also
there's so much more to enjoy about life
when it's
as
dry,
well.
you feel awful. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not good for the spirit for your happiness to be based on how well your career's going. Because my God, there'd be times I'd be miserable.
Amen, brother.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nola, again. And thank you.
Thanks.
So that's it for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed that. Next episode it was not intended to be the case, but this is the next episode. Episode 6 is going to be the final episode of season 1. It's going to be an interview with a good friend of mine, and actress Bethany Fenton. You will know Bethany from episode 1, which was an interview that I conducted with her just over 12 months ago now. This final episode of the season, I called on Beth to say, I'd like to get you on for one more to kind of bookend the season, because a lot changed. If you listen to the first episode, you'll know that she, when we recorded that, had been made redundant, and so was going to try and pursue an acting career full time, using her redundancy package. So I really wanted to touch base with her there and kind of see how she'd got on with that. So we cover a lot of that in the next episode. It's kind of a 12 months on, touching base with her. Again, I thought it'd be good to bookend the season with that. So it will be the final episode of season 1. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, either on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, Facebook Watch, whichever you prefer. And then at least when season 2 comes around, you won't miss it. But in the meantime, I'll see you in a couple of weeks.